A player spends an entire encounter making death saving throws. He recovers a little, then goes right back down. Then he gets up again, and goes right back down. What responsibility does the DM have to bail this player out? That's the question I'll be looking at in this first video in a series I'm calling After Encounter Reviews. I'm Jeff, and you're watching College of Circles. Welcome to College of Circles. In this video, I'll be reviewing a session I DM'd for a couple of years ago. And it's a session I often replay in my mind because it really gets at some of the core elements of the social aspect of Dungeons & Dragons. Now here's the background. I was the DM, and this session occurred at a local game store which runs something akin to an adventure league, but all of the campaigns are homebrewed by the store DMs. This particular season, the main story was focused on the resurrection of Drist, and I was running a side story focused on the blood wars between the Abyss and the 9 layers of Hell. During the session in question, there were 6 or 7 players, and I only have 5 on the map here, and they were all between 10th and 12th level, and they had to go to Stygia, the 5th and very frozen layer of Hell, to help Geryon reclaim his throne from Levistus. The encounter was set up so that the party had to get into a fortified bunker at the end of a frozen plain. There are 3 players relevant to this discussion: a cleric, a wizard, and an artificer. The melee players were there but not directly involved in what we will be discussing. The group was initially met by a swarm of ice mephits. As they cleared out the mephits, a new challenge entered in the form of a Narzugon riding a nightmare. Using the nightmare's ethereal stride, the Narzugon quickly bypassed the front line of melee fighters and attacked a wizard in the back. Wizard was not ready for this, and was almost immediately taken down to 0 hit points. Now the cleric was close enough to the wizard that he was able to heal him a little. Then the artificer asked, "If I cast Vortex Warp on the nightmare, will it just move the horse and leave the rider there, or will the rider go with the horse?" The artificer wanted to separate horse from rider so that the rider could not use ethereal stride, and this is a reasonable tactic. I did a quick Google search and determined that the consensus was that the rider would indeed stay behind, so the artificer cast a spell, splitting rider from horse. And here is where the discussion really begins. At this point, the Narzugon is standing right next to a downed player who keeps getting his health restored before the Narzugon's turn. Most of the players were trying to deal with the nightmare first, leaving the cleric to help the downed wizard by himself. Now the question to the community is, what would you do if you were the DM? Or how would you feel if you were the player in this situation? Leave your comment below, and if you're enjoying this type of content, please like and share this video, and of course, subscribe to this channel. Now I'll go over what I did first and why I did it, and then I'll go over some of the doubts I have and other options. I kept attacking that poor wizard. That guy spent a good hour not being able to take his turn and was constantly making death saving throws. He was not having fun, and it was obvious he was not having fun. I just don't blame him. I would be miserable in that situation myself. Every time the Narzugon's turn came up, I had an internal debate about attacking the wizard or leaving him behind to go attack someone else. Now here's why I kept attacking the wizard. From a role-playing perspective, the Narzugons have one objective: win wars for their master. When they kill mortals, that mortal is reborn on the river Styx as a Lemure. The wizard goes down, the Narzugon has done his job. Then the wizard kept getting restored. What felt right to me for the narrative aspect is that this devil would be frustrated its prey was trying to escape, and would be relentless in ensuring that did not happen. An intelligent devil committed to the death of his enemies isn't going to keep running around the battlefield splitting up his attacks, just to see his foes get healed behind his back. So I played the Narzugon the way I thought it would behave in a real battle. Kill the bastard, make sure he stays dead. From a gameplay perspective, my philosophy as a DM is I create challenges that players, using their characters and available resources, work to overcome. The only time I really intervene on a player's behalf is if I believe I created an encounter that they do not have the resources to deal with. And then I might fudge the hit points down, or have nearby NPCs help out in the fight, or have a narrative reason why the monster might back down or retreat. In this case, this fight was well within the player's ability to deal with, and it should not have been anywhere near as difficult as it turned out to be. I set up the creatures in 2 waves, a wave of low-level minions to get the party engaged but not really threaten them, and once half the methods were gone, the second wave was the Narzugon and Nightmare to really challenge the players. As far as the challenge rating goes, the Narzugon and a handful of methods would be a hard encounter. However, once the Artificer split off the Nightmare, that created a whole different encounter, and this one was deadly, but still should have been manageable. As a group, they could have easily pulled the Wizard to safety and chose not to. The Marshals kept chasing the Nightmare around instead of breaking contact and rallying around the Wizard. They just left the Cleric to deal with it. And the worst offender was the Artificer, who still had a spell slot available to cast Vortex Warp again, and could have done so the second time the Wizard was making death saving throws, or the third time, or the fourth. She wanted to save it for some other funny things she had in mind. Death is always an option in Dungeons & Dragons, and I determined that the players had the ability to help the Wizard avoid death, were choosing not to, and would be its own form of railroading if I did it for them. Now, here's where I have my doubts. I often talk about 2 aspects of D&D, the mechanical, gameplay aspect, and then the narrative story aspect. I gave my reasons above from a gameplay and narrative perspective. There is in fact a third aspect of D&D, a social aspect. The human beings actually playing the game. We play Dungeons & Dragons to have fun, that's it. Paying $5 to spend a couple of hours making death saves is not fun, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Moving that Narzugon away and going after the Paladin would not have hurt anyone, and it would have made for a much better night for that young man at my table. I will accept all reasonable criticism for my decision in that regard. A young man was suffering through a miserable night. I had the power to alleviate that suffering, and I chose not to. Would I do things differently? I told him that night no. If I was in the same situation again, I would do the same thing. The truth is, I have softened a lot since then. I am much more cognizant of the environment I create. I still run hard to deadly encounters, a lot, but I'm also aware that we play the game to have fun. And I can't be responsible for making sure everyone has that fun, but I am responsible for ensuring I've created an environment where that fun is possible. So, would I do things differently? No. I think I would do it the same way. In the short run, bailing the Wizard out would have made for a much better night for him. In the long run, that approach feels to me like cheating the game and all of the other players. The game is at its best and most fun when players have a thing they fear losing, namely their characters. Then overcome the challenge and don't lose that thing. When DMs don't allow players to fail, even when that failure is painful and heartbreaking, we cheat them of ever really feeling like their characters and they themselves ever really accomplished anything. Now, the one part I really regret was our talk afterwards. I should have sat down with him and really helped him boost his morale afterwards and encouraged him to want to slaughter every devil he ever came across after that. Instead, I was prideful and more intent on justifying my decisions than hearing out how those decisions affected him. Now, I teach a Dungeons & Dragons boot camp, and when I talk about alignment, I start by saying alignment is never an excuse to be a jerk. Likewise, proper roleplay or mechanics is never an excuse to be a jerk. Whatever we decide to do as DMs, we have to be mindful of the fact that we're playing with real people with real emotions, and to never let the game be more important than the people we play with. Now, what are your thoughts? Leave them down below, and please remember to be respectful. I'm Jeff, thank you for watching College of Circles. I'll see you in the next video, but I do have one more thought. Players, for God's sake, help your buddies out when they're getting killed by a devil.